everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Arunima Sarin. I recently graduated with a PhD in psychology from Harvard University. I have a master's in research methods from UCL in London and an undergraduate degree in psychology from India. In today's video, I'll talk about an important question that I often get from students. Should you apply to graduate programs straight out of undergrad, do a master's degree, or get some work experience? Let's get into it. So the short answer on whether you should apply for a PhD degree straight from undergrad is it depends. I'm not going to give you an answer on whether you should or shouldn't do it because ultimately this is a very individual process. It's an individual subjective decision and you have to be the best judge of whether you're ready or not. But what I'm going to do is give you 3 things that you should consider to help decide for yourself whether you are ready to apply for a PhD program or not. So the first thing that you want to kind of figure out for yourself is your research experience. When you are thinking of applying for a PhD program, first thing, do you have adequate research experience? Now, this is important for 2 reasons. The first reason this is important is for yourself. There's a big difference in being the consumer of something you enjoy and the producer of something you enjoy. Many people love reading about science. They love getting to know of different cool scientific findings, but they don't enjoy the process of creating and finding out scientific facts, right? Because the process of putting out scientific work is quite different. It's tedious, it's time consuming, it can also be quite isolating. And so the first reason that you want to ensure that you have had research experience before you are deciding on this big life decision is to make sure that you enjoy being a producer of science, right? You understand what the day-to-day entails and you enjoy that process. The second reason having good research experience is important is because it's going to make you a competitive candidate. And in fact now, because every year the pool of candidates applying to graduate programs are getting more and more competitive, having research experience is even a kind of like a basic threshold for being considered serious, right? Maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was ideal to have research experience, but not required. But now it's almost like a default implicit requirement. If you don't have research experience, your application might not even be considered seriously. So the first thing you want to see is, do you have enough research experience? If the answer to that is no, probably then branch off to using time right out of your undergrad to get that research experience. You can get it by working in a company, you can get it by working in a clinical setting, you can get it by doing a master's degree that kind of gives you the skills you would want to build, but potentially and perhaps is research focused. So you can, again, really ensure that you have enough research experience before you make that decision. If you do have enough research experience, let's move on to the next thing that's important. Do you know what you want to study? So in other words, do you have a research question or even broadly a research topic, a research area of interest? Now again, this is important for 2 reasons again, for yourself and for the person on the other end of your application evaluating you. It's important for you because you're going to commit a good 4 to 6 years of your life engaged in this area of research, engaged in this literature, engaged with people who are interested in this topic. And you want to make sure that it's something you enjoy. It's something that you find intrinsically meaningful. And it's an interest that you can sustain over time. I've spoken about this in other videos, but doing a PhD program is amazing. It's great if you enjoy science, but it's terrible if you don't. You don't get paid very much. You basically work all the time. There's very bad work-life balance. And for most people, they end up doing it at a time in their lives when they're young adults, mid to late 20s into their early 30s. And it's a time where everyone else around you, your peers, your friends from college or high school are doing jobs, getting houses, potentially getting married. And you're in a very different headspace as a graduate student. And so all of this to say that there are a lot of costs, a lot of downsides that might start to weigh a lot if the upsides of doing a PhD are not that important and fun and meaningful to you. And bringing it back, that's why you want to make sure that when you apply for a PhD program, you have a good research area in mind. You don't have to have a question. You don't need to like know exactly what you're going to study. For what it's worth, I didn't end up working on the exact questions I thought I would when I was applying for my PhD program. My interests shifted a little, but they stayed within the same area of psychology and the same types of questions that I initially started with, right? So the specific question I was working on changed, but the broad area of interest remained the same. So you want to make sure that when you apply for a PhD program, you have that research area and some kinds of questions that you can use to figure out for yourself if this is something that would be interesting for you to pursue over the next 4 or 5 years. The other reason this is important is because it again helps the person evaluating your application gauge your seriousness and gauge your preparedness for the program. Nobody expects you to know exactly what you're going to study, and most people's interests end up evolving. So that's totally normal, but a person evaluating your application still wants to make sure that you kind of know what you're doing, kind of have an idea of what you want to do, and you're not entering into this kind of blind. So the second thing that's really important is to figure out, do you have a good set of questions, a concrete area of interest? If the answer to that is no, maybe spend some time figuring out what your research interests are. You can do that again in a number of ways. You can get work with industries or companies that work at the intersection of academia and something else. Think tanks, policymaking groups. You can work within people analytics departments in different companies. So there's different ways to get a little bit more exposure, a little bit more experience with the types of things that you think you might be interested in. Or you could go and get yourself another degree, a master's degree that's potentially more applied and is focused on the research topics that you think might be interesting to you, or a degree that gives you the skills that you want to ensure you have. The third thing is, have you thought about this decision carefully and are you ready for the commitment? Graduate school is a big commitment. It is a big chunk of your life. If you apply for programs in the UK, it's anywhere between 3 to 4 years. If you apply for programs in the United States, it's anywhere between 5 to 7 years, depending on whether you're doing the research track or clinical track. It's a very big commitment of time, of energy, of resources, and also kind of trade-off, right? Is there something else that you could do with your time that would be more meaningful to you and more valuable to you? Or of all the things that you could do with your time, this is the only thing you want to do? So the third kind of question you want to ask is if you are ready for that step. This is again important for you. You want to make sure that you're not wasting time and energy and resources committing to something that is not going to be fun, that's not going to make you happy, that's not going to progress you in your life to where you want to be. It's also important because it's something you want to communicate through your personal statement, through your research statement, and in your interviews to the person on the other end who's evaluating you. Because when a faculty member takes you on as a PhD student, they're making a pretty big commitment too, right? They're committing to mentoring you, to fostering you very closely for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and then potentially being a mentor for you for your life, being associated with you for life, because you're going to be connected to the academic tree. And so you not only want to have a very clear answer to this question for yourselves, you also want to be able to demonstrate that for the person on the other end, reading your application and considering if they want to take you on, because you want to communicate to them that this is something you've thought about and you're ready and they should take the bet on you. So the third thing you need to think about is, do you have all the pieces of information? Do you understand what a PhD program entails, what the day-to-day entailed, what the career prospects are, and are you kind of ready for that commitment? Are you ready for that path, that professional path? So those are the 3 big things. Like I said, the answer to this, there is no one answer on whether you should apply to graduate programs straight from your undergrad or you should do something else before you apply. And that's because everyone's journey is different. The courses you take, the experience you get, the readings you do are all super diverse, right? So we all have a different path. For my part, I took a year after my undergrad and I worked in a home for people who had chronic schizophrenia. And that's because at the time I was really interested in clinical psychology, specifically in schizophrenia and how it ends up impacting our brain in this like super unique way. But when I worked at that rehabilitation home, I realized that my interest in the topic came not from its clinical manifestation, but rather its cognitive challenges. And so I realized that my interest was more in research than in clinical practice. And then that made me realize I don't actually have that much research experience. So then I pursued a master's degree that specialized in giving me research method skills within psychology. And it also let me explore some concrete conceptual theoretical interests I had, which then led me to identify. So at the end of my master's degree, I had to do a master's thesis project, a dissertation. And in that process is when I developed the specific area of psychology that I was interested in, which for me was moral psychology. How do we make decisions of right and wrong? How do we decide who is responsible? Who should we punish? How much? What factors should matter in these moral decisions? And so I ended up taking time. I ended up working for a year after my undergrad, then doing a master's degree, then working for another 2-ish years after my master's degree, and then applying for my PhD. And for me, that was perfect. It let me build research skills, and that journey let me figure out my research interests, interests that have sustained me now over the last 8-9 years, actually 10 years now. And so there's no one answer on what you should do, but hopefully these 3 points help you decide for yourself whether you are ready to take that plunge or not. Just to recap, here's the 3 things you need to figure out. Do you have research experience? Do you have an area of interest within research? And do you have all the pieces of information to decide whether this is the right step for you at this time or not? I hope this helps. I know having to figure out what the next steps are can be stressful and challenging. Hopefully these 3 little pieces make it a little bit more manageable, small, concrete, and a little bit less scary. If you thought this was helpful, please like this video and share it with others who you think might benefit from having a look. If you're curious about other aspects of PhD programs, how they are structured, what the differences are between PhD programs in psychology in the UK or the US, check out some other videos I have on the topic. You can also look at my website for more information. And that's it. Until next time, I'll see you later. Bye. Oh, and stay tuned for more videos.